All right, let's now talk about a little bit about what it takes to build an early warning system. It has four components. There are many ways this is pitched, but let's look at the World Meteorological Organization's early warnings for all report, and this is important because they are the world's authority and they bring together all the experts to put together such reports. So you need to have disaster risk knowledge, systematically collect data and undertake risk assessments. Are the hazards and the vulnerabilities well known by the communities? What are the patterns and trends in these factors? Are risk maps and data widely available? Okay, detection and observations, monitoring, analysis and forecasting of hazards. So develop hazard monitoring and early warning services, data networks, socioeconomic as well as physical variables. Or are the right parameters being monitored? Is there a sound scientific basis for making forecasts? Can accurate and timely warnings be generated? Preparedness and response capabilities. Build national and community response capabilities. Are response plans up to date and tested? Are local capacities and knowledge made use of? Are people prepared and ready to react to warnings? So you can see that we're going from observations, which read a lot of innovation, deployment, budget, financing, sustaining the systems and so on, and then you have decision makers and line of command on who takes decisions when early warning is issued, let's say for a flood or heat wave or whatever else, and then people have to be trained to use this information, and that is not an easy thing. That, you know, especially if you issue an order to evacuate because a cyclone is coming, people generally may want to hold on to what little they have and say, I'm not moving, I'm going to live through this, and many bad things happen when people do that, right? So warning, dissemination and communication. So this is a critical component of, even if you have a great system, if it is not getting out there and reaching the decision makers and the people who are going to be affected, then you are failing. So communicate risk information and early warnings. Do warnings reach all of those at risk? Are those risks and warnings understood by the people who are looking at the early warnings? Is the warning information clear and usable? You know, if you say something and they feel like something is happening but they don't understand it, then you may fail to get people to act, right? You also need cost benefit analysis of early warning systems so that countries can decide on whether to invest in these or not. This is from the Hydromet Gap report, but there is also a global adaptation commission on global adaptation which said early warnings investments have 10 times the return if you look at benefits over the next few decades. The World Bank estimates that 23,000 lives per year could be saved by upgrading Hydromet and early warning systems in low and middle income countries to meet the standard European systems. Furthermore, just a 24-hour warning of a coming storm or heat wave can reduce damages by 30%. In addition to reducing loss of life and assets, losses in well-being can also be mitigated. So people get anxious, get sick, depressed, and then you have all kinds of consequences on economies as well. Follow-up World Bank study found that losses in well-being can be as much as 60% higher than asset losses. It's very easy to look at asset losses, photograph them, but well-being losses are not easily measured. Lower socioeconomic communities, however, experience of asset losses is around half of the global average amount. They suffer disproportionately as these losses have larger implication at lower income levels. If you have one little thing like a fishing boat, if it's gone, you may be destroyed for a while, whereas rich people can always rebuild and go, you know, use their bank deposits to recover and so on. Minimum annual socioeconomic benefits of weather prediction avoided the losses by just warning people, so increased productivity as well. So disaster management, $66 billion in increased productivity for agriculture, energy, transportation, water supply and construction together add up to $162 billion per year, I suspect. It has also been found that reliable and accurate early warning systems create benefits worth at least 4 times their cost of implementing. So cost benefit analysis should be a piece of cake. Saving lives and assets, of course, is a co-benefit in addition to economies, but uh, just initial investment may be a big handicap for low-income countries and least developed countries, but World Bank and other organizations, international aid can be helpful. The notion that the benefits of met and hydromet services significantly exceed the costs to produce and deliver these services is not based on a single authoritative global study. In critically analyzing the cost benefit of early warning systems and hydromet services in general, the WMO reviewed more than 140 studies in which cost benefit ratio ranged from 2 to 1 to 36 to 1. Each dollar will bring back $36 of benefit. The distribution of BCRs investigated undoubtedly support the recognition, that's the cost benefit ratio, benefit cost ratio, support the recognition that early warning systems have the potential to deliver a tenfold on investment, which is what the Global Commission on Adaptation put out. As for Sendai framework, target G vis-a-vis early warning component, we'll look at a few graphs on the scoring system and how they need to get better. So let me leave this for the next podcast, even though I mentioned it in the title. I'm mentioning it here. Basically, we are looking at early warning system component, as we already showed: disaster risk knowledge, detection, observation, monitoring, analysis, and forecasting of hazards, preparedness and response capabilities, warning, dissemination, and communication, and then corresponding Sendai framework indicator goes from G1 to G5 and even G6 here. So we'll come back and see what we mean by those in terms of number of countries and the scores. So you want to see how well the countries are already doing in terms of disaster risk reduction, which was the main Sendai framework goal. As I mentioned, India, for example, has made massive investments in national disaster management agencies and their connections not only down the line to local governments but also to the India Meteorology Department, which issues forecasts so that when a cyclone comes, heat wave comes and floods, etc., the National Disaster Management Agency tries to get specific information from the early warning production people to take action, because if you have to act, you have to move assets, you have to move rescuers, rescue equipment, resources, hydration, let's say food availability, hospital access, all sorts of things need to happen. So the line of command has to work like a military drill. It's a war when you are managing a disaster, and everything has to work and nobody can be lax about disobeying orders or not paying attention. So that's a big deal. So you need to have a good evaluation of your national disaster management response, effectiveness, efficiency, and so on. Okay, we'll come back and discuss a bit more in the next podcast, which probably is going to be the last one. Okay.